Alright, guys, this is part one of the motivation lectures. Probably going to be about 3 or 4 parts to this one, so I'll label them in order so you know which way to go. Alright, so for motivation for this unit, we split it motivation, emotion. Motivation is generally just looking like what are the theories of why we're motivated to do stuff, and then it gets more specific into what about motivation for like eating behaviors, motivation in the workplace, motivation on the social level, and then also we talk about sexual motivation, which we'll tackle tomorrow probably along with hunger motivation. Okay, so when we look at the definition of motivation, it's a need or desire that energizes and directs behavior towards a goal. You guys probably can synthesize that to understand that it's something that pushes us to do something, right? It could be that we're meeting a biological or mental need. It could be it's just motivating us to do something we want to do because of personal enjoyment or personal reasons. So, for a long time, people have looked at motivation. Even at the birth of psychology, some of these founding people were trying to identify what motivates human behaviors. Since psychologists are looking at mental processes and behaviors, there's all these key elements to it, and one of them is motivation. So the first time that it was explained, William James tackled it, and he explained motivation through instincts. He said that all creatures, including us as humans, have instinctual behaviors. They can be pretty complex, they're inherited, they're passed down, and they're really unlearned. They're just things that are kind of inbred into us. They're already there. And he came up with a list of about 37 different instincts that he identified for humans specifically. While it was a good start, and William James, if you remember, he is big on believing Darwin's theory of evolution, so it's not surprising that he's equating us to the animal kingdom, since that is what Darwin did often with his theories of evolution and survival of the fittest. So James is still kind of on that Darwin train. The problem is there's a really big difficulty in using instincts to both label and explain behaviors. There's not a lot of explanation there besides saying like it's in us, it's there, it just is there from birth. We're born with it. That's it. That's not a lot of explanation to it. And when we think of instincts of animals, it's a lot of stuff like they know how to walk quickly, or bees know how to find pollen. There's all these instinctual behaviors, but humans, there might be instinctual behaviors like to breed or to eat. But what about all those weird things that some of us like to do and are motivated to do, and others are not, like thrill-seeking behaviors? Like, why does somebody want to go and try and go on like a wild safari where they could come in contact with wild animals and get hurt? Why does somebody want to do that and others are like too fearful? Or things like bungee jumping. Why would somebody risk doing that and others are not? That's not an instinctual behavior as far as what we can tell. So this theory was a good place to start, but it is not anything that stuck around. From there, people determined that it's probably more related to drives. You have these aroused states of tension, so these like conflicting, uncomfortable, imbalanced feelings. And when you have a drive, you have a motivation then to correct that drive or to fix it or to balance it out. So maybe there is a drive for like hunger. You feel hunger and it motivates you to do a certain behavior, which is to eat. That drive is just that feeling of hunger, that feeling of imbalance. Something's not right in my body. So this is a piece of the theory, the first one, the original, called drive reduction theory. So drive reduction theory was started by Clark Hall, and it says that when we have a physiological need, it creates this imbalanced state, this drive, that motivates us to do a behavior to fix the imbalance. So, for instance, eating and drinking, they're examples of drive-reducing behavior. I'm hungry, it's a state of imbalance. I have a drive called hunger, and it motivates me to do the behavior of eating, and when I eat, it balances everything out. I'm no longer hungry, the drive is gone, and I'm back to being in this balanced, perfect state for a while. So we look at drive reduction theory. We have our need, which is to live, we need food and water. It's just survival things. Then, because we need these things, when our needs are not being met, we have a drive that's exhibited through, in this case, hunger or thirst. And then we have a drive reducing behavior occur, which is eating and drinking. And they think that this describes motivation. Motivation, why do we eat? Why do we drink? Why do we do these behaviors? Well, these are all based on kind of necessary survival things. It could even be like sex could be thrown in there too. If there is some need for procreation, you have a sex drive, and then you can do certain things to reduce that drive. They're all things that are there, but at the same time, there's still some holes in this theory, which we'll talk about. Kind of one of those things, like I mentioned bungee jumping. Where is the need, and what is the drive for that? It feels like it's not something everyone has, and it's not something you need to survive, so there's some problems with this theory. Now, with this theory, it comes into question this homeostasis status. So Walter Cannon, who we'll talk about more in this chapter, he kind of comes up with this idea of homeostasis, this idea that we need to maintain balance, or this internal state of consistency. And anytime that we have our balance or our homeostasis out of whack, it's not there, it's not balanced, things in our body signal us. So maybe something like hunger, maybe you have a dip in your blood sugar, and that tells you need to go eat. It's the motivating, driving factor behind it. So anytime anything changes, our body gives off signals of this. It could be something like hunger with the dip in blood sugar, or it could be body temp that we're notably triggered by because we're either sweating or maybe we're shivering, things like that. So using that body temp example, we have here, you have a normal body temp, everything's great, but then you dive into a really cold body of water, and this makes your body temperature drop and throws you out of homeostasis. So when this decrease occurs, your body will do things to try to reduce the issue and bring you back to a balanced state. You might start shivering, which is usually the case, and your blood vessels constrict to try to retain heat. And so this is supposed to get you back up to the normal body pressure. Your body just kind of seems predisposed or pre-programmed to do this stuff, to get you back to homeostasis if it can do it on its own. You go the other way too with normal body temp, but you go for a really long run on a hot day and your body temp increases. Your body does things to get you back down to that normal level or the regular normal body temp. So you start sweating a bunch to cool yourself down, and your blood vessels dilate to try to get rid of some of the heat that your body is holding into, all with the goal of getting you back to a normal body pressure. So this is stuff that seems to be just innately in us, which really plays off that idea of drive reduction theory, the motivation that your body internally has of wanting to go back to a normal state, wanting to go back to a balanced state, this need for homeostasis. So if drive reduction theory is the one, it's the reason that explains every behavior and its motivation, well, can it answer this question? Does it explain why people go on roller coasters, or why some people are motivated to go jump out of an airplane? No, it doesn't. There's no biological reason. There's nothing to do with homeostasis to motivate someone to go do something that can put them in danger or is based on like thrill-seeking behaviors. So we have to come up with a different theory for it, and we call these theories arousal theories, meaning basically just like excitement theories or like thrill-seeking theories in essence. So it's the idea that when it comes to arousal, every person has a different level of stimulation they like from their environment. Some of you guys are really low key, you don't like a lot of noise, you don't like a lot of excitement, you maybe aren't like thrill seekers, risk takers. And then we have other people in class who are extra excessive in this, where they need large amounts of stimulation. They do better when it's really noisy. They do better with a lot of engagement. They want to go and skydive someday. So that's my example I always use. Me, personally, I would never want to skydive. Like, every once in a while I'll think about it, and I realize it's too much. I would freak out. I wouldn't be able to handle it. Versus whenever I ask kids in class, there's always a couple that are like, oh man, I think it would be so great, so fun. There's just huge differences individually from us. And so this arousal theory explains why we're motivated to do stuff that's not biologically required or driven, and why some people seek certain behaviors and some do not. When we look at how we measure arousal, we look at brain activity, heart rate, muscle tension, all of these things, how much excitement our body is experiencing at one moment, and at what level people really enjoy that. So we know that humans and animals both appear to really like novel stimulation. They like excitement. They like things, dogs. They like playing with toys. They like being chased. They like all these things that are fun in essence. But you also have some dogs that are like not too big into it, or like maybe cats are a better example, where they don't like. Some cats love a lot of affection. They like a lot of attention. They like to play. Others just want to be left alone. Humans are kind of like that too. So McGill University did a study though, because they asked the question, who wants to do nothing? Who wants to do absolutely nothing? If we want to maintain homeostasis, we would want to spend as much time as possible in a resting state. We would want to just sit there and be in a balanced state and not really do anything that could throw us out of whack. So McGill University said, we will pay you $100 a day. Let's delete this. $100 a day to do absolutely nothing. And so this was in the 1950s, and it was like $20 a day, which was good in 1950. And people signed up for it. Like, if I asked you guys, if you were coming into a lab I ran and I said, hey, I will pay you $100 today if you do nothing, how many of you would sign up? I always have a lot of kids sign up like $100 to do absolutely nothing. You're not going to do anything to me. Nope. You just got to sit there. $100 a day. Cool. We'll see how many days you can go, maybe, if you can make it through one. Well, here's the trick. Doing nothing, this university said, doing nothing means you can't engage with your environment in any way. So basically, they put them in a state of sensory deprivation. They put them in a quiet cubicle. They put noise-canceling headphones on so they couldn't hear anything. They put a blindfold over them so they couldn't see anything. They could not get up out of the chair. They had to sit there in the dark and the quiet. And many people were like, all right, that's fine. I'm going to make $100 a day. I'll just sleep. Well, the thing with sensory deprivation is when you're cut off from the environment, you lose track of time. So people would try to sleep, and they think they had slept for like an hour. It had been like 10 minutes. No one made it through the day. No one made it through the day at all, of a day doing nothing and no exposure to any stimuli. And what it proved was humans do need interaction. We do need some level of stimulation from our environment. We might not all need to go jump out of a plane or be in a big crowd, but we all need something. We need something to stimulate our brain and our senses to keep us engaged even at a very minimal level. So doing nothing is not really an option, which pushes for the idea of arousal theory. We all need some kind of arousal stimulating environment. So when we look at this stuff, we have the levels of alertness, wakefulness, and activation caused by activity in the central nervous system. Once again, this is just saying people are different. All these activities, all these things can be measured because our CNS gets stimulated and it gets excited. We all are at different levels though. And if we want to step away from everyone's a complete individual and it's on a case-by-case basis, we do have this optimal level of arousal theory. It's called the Yerkes-Dodson law. And this was one that was on the AP exam 2 years ago, I think. So it is something that College Board looks at. This theory says that we like level of arousal, we like stimulation, we like excitement, or maybe we could even say like a little bit of stress to an extent. But if we don't have enough, we flop in our performance, or if we have too much, we also flop in our performance. We have to find the level of stimulation that is optimal per person based on what task they're doing and how skilled they are at it. So we talked about social facilitation, right? If you remember that word from social psych chapter in regular psychology class, social facilitation is all about if people are watching you do something that you're good at, you do better at it, which would talk about this Yerkes-Dodson law saying if you're good at something and people watch you, it gives you extra stimulation, extra arousal and excitement from that crowd that you do better. So it plays into this as well. So here is our graph of the Yerkes-Dodson law. So in the dark blue, you have this difficult task. If something is hard for us, if it's something that's difficult for us personally, then we would want a low level of arousal. So maybe when I have you guys take a unit exam like the one yesterday, it was difficult for most of you, right? So you needed low arousal. You don't want people talking. You don't want me playing music. You wouldn't want me making a bunch of noise up front. It's a difficult task, so you need less stimulation from your environment. Now, an easy task. If I was having you do something like color a picture just for fun. It's a low stress, low impact, assignment. I could be playing music in the room. People could be talking. You could even have people running around the room being off task, and you would still be successful at it. You might even be better at it than if I said, we're quiet, we're coloring in complete silence. That might actually hurt your chances of being, better performance at this. If it's something we're good at, we need a lot of stimulation. If it's something we're bad at or struggle with, we need low stimulation. So this would be like why people doing a play, they do better at it when they're being watched in an audience as long as they've mastered their lines. If they've mastered their lines and they know them like the back of their hand, it's an easy task. A little bit of audience input will make them perform better. But if they have no clue and haven't practiced their lines, any amount of pressure from an audience will make them flop. Okay, one of these opponent processing theories that we don't spend really any time on because no one covers it, but it's one of those that's specifically used to explain addiction. It looks at, before, if you have somebody who's smoking, they're at a baseline before they've had a cigarette, but then they smoke and they get kind of a buzz or a high off of it, and that feels great for them. And then they stop smoking, and then eventually the effects of kind of these withdrawal symptoms make you feel motivation to smoke again. So it's that opponent process. It's the opposite. You're trying to return to a neutral state, and you hate it, so you oppose that, and you go back to being motivated to smoke more cigarettes or, go back to whatever thing you're addicted to. Now, incentive theory is another one. This is, once again, pushing for those biological factors, but also including environmental factors. It says that we are motivated by incentives, these positive or negative environmental stimuluses that motivate our behavior. So this is Skinner. This is so Skinner, so operant conditioning based, so behaviorism, rewards and punishments. You are incentivized to do something if it's a positive outcome. So it could be something like you're motivated to eat because it smells real good. The smell is that reinforcer. It's that reward. It's that incentive to want to eat that food because it smells so good. Okay? It can be negative incentives too, pushing you or punishing you from doing something. The outcome would be bad, so you're less motivated to capitalize on this. So in drive reduction theory, the motivation is all internal. But in incentive theory, the motivation is all environmental or external. So there's definitely this reverse between the two theories. Drive reduction is internal motivation, and then you have incentive theory, which is very external motivation or extrinsically motivated. And then, of course, since evolutionary theory is part of our major perspectives here, some people say that some of our behaviors are adaptive and that they are still like kind of these residual fallouts from our cavemen days, from our hunter and gatherer ancestors when humanity was first born. So this idea of the motivation for men to be dominant, the idea that males puff their chests out at each other and try to be dominant with each other, or the idea of men asserting dominance over women. Maybe this is based on these old school adaptive things where females would want a dominant male because they could protect the family. They would have better offspring, better chances of survival. So maybe that's why men still act more dominant and women appear to still like those dominant men. Men are just kind of hardwired to be more aggressive, be more dominant, kind of do more of that peacocking activity to show they're stronger, better, faster, whatever, than all the other males, because it leads to them getting the best mates, getting whatever mate they want, intimidating and challenging people who are threatening them, and even acquire more material wealth by like taking what they want. And then as far as our motivation for being social as humans, for wanting to have friends, for wanting to have a family, for wanting to feel a sense of belonging. This could be because back in the hunter and gatherer days, if you were alone, you had no one with you, you'd probably die. No one would have children with you, so your lineage would die. But also, if you did have a baby and you were by yourself, you really wouldn't have anyone to help you rear them, and that's a really important piece of it. You need help for hunting and gathering. You need interactions. You need a social group so you can procreate and keep your species going. So maybe that's the reason why today, in 2019, we still have this push to find our mates or find social groupings that we belong to. And then a refresher over Maslow's hierarchy. This is also what people claim as a motivational theory. These needs he progresses, it could just be Maslow's hierarchy of needs, motivational theory. This motivation of we're always striving for that self-actualization, so we're motivated to accomplish stuff at each stage. So remember, as a review, he's a humanistic psychologist, and he believes that we are always striving to be our best, but we have to climb up this pyramid, this hierarchy, in order to be the best version of ourselves. And so in it, he talks about how physiological needs are at the bottom, then you go up through safety and belonging, psychological needs, until eventually you may reach the top. Higher levels can't be reached until lower levels are all met at a very satisfactory or successful rating. His peak level of existence on his hierarchy is self-actualization, and according to Maslow, this is living up to your full potential and your fullest unique potential. Each person's is different. Remember, we talked about that. Maybe some of you have a very, very high potential, like out of this world potential, and that's what you need to try to reach. And other of us, ours are still great potentials, but maybe they're not as high as yours. You have to reach whatever your peak is, your top, whatever that looks like. You don't compare it to others. So we talked about, sorry about that. We talked about his pyramid going from physiological needs of hunger, thirst, survival needs. Then, is your world predictable? Do you feel like you know what's coming next? Do you feel secure in your environment, in your family, in your relationships? Then after that, you have to be able to love somebody and be loved in return, not be lonely, be a social person. Self-esteem, do you feel like you are very accomplished? Do people respect you? Do you get recognition for your potential, for your abilities at work or in school or in your family? Basically, are you getting fed the self-esteem feedback you need to feel like a successful person? And then if all those are met, you reach self-actualization. But remember, let's say you're at self-actualization and then something tragic happens and all of a sudden you end up homeless. Well, now you're back to those bottom levels of the hierarchy and have to start your climb again. So things in life can knock you back down and you have to climb back up. Once you reach self-actualization, it doesn't mean you're there forever. You can bounce around a lot, unfortunately. All right, so this is the end of the motivational theories portion of things. And so you were given 2 worksheets by whoever is covering class today. And one of them I'm going to focus and give you another video to go with it. And it's like, I think it's called Music Trivia. And so as a review kind of game, we're going to play it in class, but now that I'm gone, we're not going to. You guys are going to watch this next video, and you're going to try to guess, based on the lyrics of this song, which motivational theory it goes along with. And then on the back of that worksheet, I believe they have Maslow's hierarchy, where they give you situations and you have to name them. This is something that you need to get done. If you don't do it in class today, that's fine, but you do need to do it tonight, and they will need to be handed in tomorrow. You will also be given another practice worksheet about the different theories that are just scenarios, and you have to come up with which one fits best, which is also due tomorrow. So, if you're done with this, listen to the music trivia one, please.